The sun peeked over the tall mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and orange. Aiyana, her dark hair braided with colorful beads, hummed a soft tune as she walked beside the river. Little Tala, her daughter, splashed in the cool water, her laughter echoing through the trees. Tala, barely 5 years old, was the light of Aiyana's life. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her small hands were always reaching for something new to explore. Their home was a small, cozy teepee nestled among the trees, a place of warmth and love. Aiyana taught Tala the ways of their people, how to find berries, how to track animals, and how to respect the land. Tala loved listening to her mother's stories about the stars and the spirits of their ancestors. Life was simple, but it was filled with joy. Each day was a gift, a chance to share laughter and love with her precious child. They were a family, whole and complete in their peaceful corner of the world. Aiyana often thought about the future, dreaming of all the things Tala would learn and become. But their peaceful existence was about to be shattered. A dark cloud was gathering on the horizon, one that would change their lives forever. The sound of horses' hooves broke the morning's tranquility. Aiyana looked up, shielding her eyes. A group of soldiers, their blue uniforms stark against the green landscape, rode into their valley. Their leader, a stern-faced man with a sharp mustache, dismounted and approached Aiyana. "We're here to take the girl," he said, his voice cold and without warmth. "It's for her own good. We'll teach her to read and write, give her a proper education." Aiyana's heart pounded in her chest. "No," she cried, pulling Tala close. "She belongs with me." The soldier ignored her pleas. Two men stepped forward, reaching for Tala. Aiyana fought them with all her might, but they were too strong. Tala screamed, her small voice filled with terror, as they pulled her away from her mother's grasp. "Mother!" Tala cried, reaching out to Aiyana as she was lifted onto a horse. Aiyana stumbled forward, desperate to reach her daughter, but the soldiers held her back. The officer watched, his expression unyielding. "It's for the best," he repeated, as if trying to convince himself. With a final, heart-wrenching cry, Tala was gone, carried away by the soldiers. Aiyana collapsed to the ground, her body shaking with sobs. The world around her seemed to fade away, leaving only the echo of her daughter's desperate cry. The sobs eventually subsided, replaced by a cold, hard anger. Aiyana stood, her eyes blazing with a newfound fire. The pain of losing Tala was unbearable, but it fueled a fierce determination. She would not beg. She would not plead. She would get her daughter back. She looked around at her empty teepee, at the river where Tala had laughed just hours before. Every corner of their home was a reminder of her stolen child. But instead of despair, Aiyana felt a surge of strength. She would not let Tala become a stranger to her own people. She would not let her daughter forget the stories of her ancestors. She would not let the soldiers steal her child's spirit. Aiyana began to gather her belongings, her hunting knife, her bow and arrows, a blanket, and a pouch of dried berries. She knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed help, and she knew where to find it. Deep in the mountains, far from the reach of the law, lived a group of outcasts, men and women who had been wronged by the same system that had taken Tala. They were rough, they were dangerous, but they were also skilled and loyal. Aiyana knew that they were her only hope. With a determined set to her jaw, Aiyana turned her back on her former life and set off into the wilderness. Her heart was filled with a mother's love, now transformed into a burning desire for revenge. The warpath had begun. The journey to the mountains was long and arduous. Aiyana traveled through dense forests and across rocky terrain, her determination pushing her onward. She remembered stories her grandfather told of this land, of hidden trails and secret passages. She used that knowledge now, navigating the wilderness with skill and purpose. Finally, she reached a hidden canyon, the entrance to the outcast's hideout. A lone figure stood guard, a weathered man with a rifle slung across his shoulder. He eyed Aiyana with suspicion. "State your business," he growled. "I am Aiyana," she replied, her voice firm. I seek the help of those who have been wronged. The guard studied her for a moment, then nodded. Follow me. He led her through a narrow passage into a bustling camp. Men and women, a diverse group of individuals, went about their daily tasks. Some were cleaning weapons, others were tending to horses, and a few were gathered around a fire, sharing stories. Aiyana felt a flicker of hope. These were not the kind of people who would turn a blind eye to injustice. These were people who understood what it meant to fight for what was right. She was one step closer to getting Tala back. Now, she just had to convince them to join her fight. The guard led Aiyana to a large tent in the center of the camp. Inside, a woman with a stern face and piercing blue eyes sat behind a rough-hewn table. This was Sarah, the leader of the outcasts. I hear you seek our help, Sarah said, her voice raspy but strong. Tell me your story. Aiyana recounted the events of the morning, her voice filled with emotion as she described the soldiers taking Tala. When she finished, the camp was silent. Sarah leaned forward. The army, they've caused trouble for all of us, taking what isn't theirs. She looked around at the faces of the others in the tent. But raiding a fort, that's suicide. A grizzled old man with a missing eye spoke up. She's got spirit, Sarah, more than most I've seen. A young woman with quick hands and a mischievous grin added. And think of the supplies we could get. Sarah considered their words. It's a dangerous mission. Many will die. Aiyana met Sarah's gaze, her eyes unwavering. I'm willing to risk everything to get my daughter back. Will you help me? Sarah studied Aiyana's face, seeing the fierce determination in her eyes. A slow smile spread across her face. All right, she said. We'll help you. But you listen to me. We do this my way. Aiyana nodded, relief washing over her. She had found her allies. The fight for Tala was about to begin. These are the people who will help you, Sarah said, gesturing to a small group gathered nearby. First, there's Eagle Eye Jackson. Best sharpshooter I know, but haunted by his past. Jackson, a tall, lean man with a grim expression, nodded curtly. He clutched his rifle like a lifeline. Then we have Silas, Sarah continued, pointing to a stoic Native American man with keen eyes. He knows these lands better than anyone. A tracker, a hunter, and silent as the wind. Silas offered a slight bow. And this is Maria, Sarah said, smiling at the young woman with quick hands. Fastest fingers in the West. She can pick any lock, disable any trap. Maria winked, a mischievous glint in her eyes. We also have Jebediah, Sarah added, indicating a large, burly man with a booming laugh. He's our muscle, and a pretty good cook, too. Jebediah grinned, flexing his impressive biceps. Aiyana looked at each of them, recognizing the strength and determination in their eyes. They were an unlikely group, each with their own scars and stories, but they were united by a common desire for justice. They would become her family, bound together by their shared mission to rescue Tala. Aiyana knew that with these people by her side, anything was possible. The odds were still stacked against them, but together they stood a chance. The group gathered around a rough map drawn in the dirt, the fort marked with a crude circle. The main gate is heavily guarded, Sarah explained, pointing to the map. High walls, watchtowers, getting in won't be easy. Silas spoke, his voice low and steady. There's a back entrance, a supply tunnel. Less guarded, but narrow and easily defended. Maria chimed in. I can get us through any lock, but we need a distraction. Something to draw the guards away from the main points. Jackson added, I can take out the guards in the watchtowers, give us some cover. His eyes narrowed, but I'll need a clear line of sight. Jebediah cracked his knuckles. I can create a distraction. A big one. Aiyana listened intently, her mind racing. The fort was a fortress, a symbol of the power that had taken her daughter. The risks were enormous. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing well-trained soldiers. But Aiyana knew that they had one thing the soldiers didn't, a mother's love and the unwavering loyalty of her new family. We'll use the supply tunnel, Aiyana said, her voice firm. Maria, you and Silas will lead the way. Jackson, you take out the watchtowers. Jebediah, you create a diversion at the main gate. Sarah and I will find Tala. The plan was risky, but it was their only hope. They had to be quick, they had to be precise, and they had to be brave. The fate of Tala, and perhaps the entire territory, rested on their shoulders. Days turned into nights as the team prepared for the raid. Jackson practiced his sharpshooting, hitting targets from incredible distances, his movements precise and deadly. Silas guided Aiyana through the surrounding terrain, teaching her how to move silently and track enemies. Maria honed her lock-picking skills, swiftly opening even the most complex mechanisms. Jebediah worked on his strength, lifting heavy objects and practicing hand-to-hand combat. Aiyana, driven by her love for Tala, pushed herself harder than ever before. She learned to shoot a rifle, to throw a knife, to fight with her bare hands. Sarah taught her how to strategize, how to anticipate her enemies' moves. The training was grueling, pushing them all to their limits. They practiced scaling walls, crawling through tunnels, and coordinating their movements. Mistakes were made, lessons were learned, and slowly but surely, they became a well-oiled machine. As the day of the raid drew closer, the tension in the camp grew. Each member of the team carried the weight of the mission on their shoulders. They knew that failure meant certain death, not just for themselves, but for Tala as well. But they were ready, they were prepared, and they were determined to succeed. The montage of training created a palpable sense of anticipation. The air crackled with the electricity of their shared purpose. Under the cloak of darkness, the team set off for the fort. Silas led the way, his knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable. They navigated treacherous mountain passes, forded swift-flowing rivers, and skirted around dense forests. The journey tested their endurance and their resolve. One evening, as they made camp, a small scouting party stumbled upon their location. A brief but intense skirmish erupted. Jackson's sharpshooting skills proved crucial, taking down 2 soldiers before they could raise the alarm. Jebediah's brute strength quickly subdued the remaining scout. The encounter, though dangerous, brought the team closer together. They had faced death and emerged victorious, their bond strengthened by their shared experience. Aiyana saw a new level of trust and respect in their eyes. They were no longer just a group of outcasts, but a family, united by their loyalty to each other and their commitment to rescuing Tala. As they continued their journey, Aiyana felt a growing sense of hope. She knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but she also knew that she was not alone. She had her family by her side, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Each obstacle overcome solidified their resolve, bringing them closer to their goal. The fort was within reach. The moon hung high in the sky as the team approached the fort. The silhouette of the imposing structure loomed against the horizon. It was time. Jackson positioned himself on a nearby ridge, his rifle trained on the watchtowers. Silas and Maria stealthily made their way to the supply tunnel, their movements silent and precise. Jebediah, with a mischievous grin, prepared his diversion at the main gate. Aiyana and Sarah waited for the signal, their hearts pounding in their chests. A sudden explosion rocked the fort as Jebediah detonated a series of carefully placed charges near the main gate. Chaos erupted as soldiers scrambled to respond. Jackson, taking advantage of the confusion, eliminated the guards in the watchtowers with deadly accuracy. Silas and Maria slipped into the supply tunnel, navigating the dark and narrow passage with ease. They reached the first lock and Maria set to work, her nimble fingers swiftly manipulating the tumblers. The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside. Aiyana and Sarah moved swiftly through the fort, using the chaos as cover. They knew they had to find Tala quickly before the soldiers regained control. The raid had begun, and the fate of Tala hung in the balance. Each step was a risk, but Aiyana pressed on, fueled by her unwavering love for her daughter. The carefully orchestrated plan was now in motion. Aiyana and Sarah fought their way through the chaotic fort, their path strewn with fallen soldiers. They reached the officers' quarters and burst through the door, weapons drawn. The commanding officer, the same stern-faced man who had taken Tala, stood behind his desk, a look of surprise on his face. He quickly regained his composure and reached for his pistol. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice cold. "This is a military installation. You're trespassing." "Where's my daughter?" Aiyana demanded, her voice trembling with rage. "She's being educated," the officer replied, a smirk playing on his lips. "She's learning to be civilized." "Civilized?" Aiyana spat. "You stole her from her home, from her family. That's not civilization, that's cruelty." The officer raised his pistol, aiming it at Aiyana. "I gave her a chance at a better life. Her life was better with me." Aiyana screamed, lunging forward. Sarah intervened, grabbing Aiyana's arm. "Not yet," she whispered. "We need to find Tala first." A tense standoff ensued, the air thick with animosity. The officer held his ground, his eyes fixed on Aiyana. Aiyana, fueled by her maternal rage, was ready to strike. The fate of Tala and the outcome of the entire raid hung in the balance. This confrontation was unavoidable. The officer fired his pistol, but Sarah shoved Aiyana out of the way, taking the bullet in her shoulder. Aiyana, enraged, tackled the officer, disarming him. A fierce hand-to-hand battle ensued. Meanwhile, the alarm had been raised, and soldiers swarmed the officers' quarters. Jackson provided cover from a nearby rooftop, picking off soldiers as they approached. Silas and Maria, having successfully navigated the tunnels, emerged inside the fort, engaging the enemy in close-quarters combat. Jebediah, having completed his diversion, joined the fray, his brute strength proving invaluable in the chaotic battle. Aiyana fought with a ferocity born of a mother's love. She dodged bullets, parried blows, and took down soldiers with ruthless efficiency. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, she refused to surrender. Her determination inspired her allies, who fought with equal courage and skill. The battle raged on, the fort echoing with the sounds of gunfire and screams. Aiyana knew that they couldn't win a prolonged fight. They had to find Tala and escape before it was too late. But with each passing moment, the odds seemed to grow more insurmountable. Aiyana's courage, however, never wavered. She would not give up. She would get her daughter back, no matter the cost. The entire territory seemed to hold its breath. Just as Aiyana began to despair, she heard a faint cry. "Mother!" Following the sound, she burst into a small room where a group of children were huddled together, looking frightened. And there, in the center of the room, was Tala. "Tala!" Aiyana cried, rushing to her daughter and embracing her tightly. "I'm here, my love. I'm here." Tala clung to her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mother, I was so scared." "I know, my darling. But we're going home now," Aiyana said, her voice filled with emotion. But their reunion was short-lived. Soldiers stormed the room, surrounding them. Aiyana knew that they were trapped. "Take Tala and go," Sarah said, her voice weak but firm. "We'll hold them off." Aiyana hesitated. She couldn't leave her friends behind, but she knew that Tala's safety had to come first. "I'll come back for you," Aiyana promised, her eyes filled with tears. With a heavy heart, Aiyana grabbed Tala's hand and ran, leaving her friends to face the overwhelming odds. It was the hardest decision she had ever made, but she knew that it was the only way to ensure Tala's survival. The escape route was perilous, but Aiyana pressed on, her determination fueled by her love for her daughter and the promise she had made to her friends. Aiyana, clutching Tala tightly, raced through the fort, dodging soldiers and explosions. The sounds of battle echoed around them, a constant reminder of the danger they were in. They reached the outer walls, and Aiyana, using all her strength, hoisted Tala over the top. She quickly followed, landing heavily on the other side. But their escape was far from over. Soldiers poured out of the fort, pursuing them relentlessly. Aiyana, with Tala in her arms, ran through the darkness, her lungs burning, her legs aching. She knew that she couldn't outrun them. She had to find a way to lose them. Using her knowledge of the terrain, Aiyana led Tala through a dense forest, scrambling over rocks and pushing through thick undergrowth. They reached a steep cliff, and Aiyana, without hesitation, jumped, landing safely on a pile of soft earth below. The soldiers followed, but the descent proved too difficult. Aiyana and Tala continued their escape, their bodies battered and bruised, their spirits weary but unbroken. They faced every obstacle with courage and determination, their bond strengthened by the shared ordeal. The pursuit was relentless, but Aiyana's resolve was unbreakable. She would protect Tala no matter the cost. The escape tested them both, physically and emotionally, pushing them to their absolute limits. As dawn approached, Aiyana and Tala found themselves cornered in a narrow canyon. The remaining soldiers, led by the relentless commanding officer, had finally caught up to them. "It's over, Aiyana," the officer said, his voice filled with triumph. "There's nowhere left to run." Aiyana held Tala close, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I will never surrender," she declared. The officer signaled his men to advance, but Aiyana was ready. Using her knowledge of the canyon, she set traps and ambushes, picking off the soldiers one by one. She fought with a cunning and ferocity that surprised even herself. The officer, realizing that he was outmatched, challenged Aiyana to a one-on-one duel. Aiyana accepted, knowing that this was her only chance to secure their freedom. The two faced each other, their eyes locked in a deadly stare. Aiyana drew her knife, her hand steady. The officer drew his sword, his face grim. The battle was swift and brutal. Aiyana, using all the skills she had learned, dodged the officer's attacks and landed a series of precise blows. Finally, with a well-aimed strike, she disarmed the officer and stood over him, her knife pointed at his throat. "This is for my daughter," she said, her voice filled with righteous anger. With a final, decisive move, she ended the fight, securing their freedom once and for all. With the remaining soldiers defeated, Aiyana and Tala made their way back to the outcast camp. To Aiyana's relief, most of her friends had survived the battle, though they were wounded and weary. Sarah, despite her shoulder injury, greeted them with a warm smile. Together, they decided that it was no longer safe to stay in their old hideout. The raid on the fort had sent a clear message to the authorities, and they knew that they would be hunted. Silas led them to a hidden valley, far from the reach of civilization. It was a place of breathtaking beauty, with lush meadows, sparkling streams, and towering mountains. Here, they could start anew, build a community based on respect, equality, and freedom. Aiyana and Tala, surrounded by their new family, finally found peace. They built a small cabin, planted a garden, and began to rebuild their lives. Tala learned the stories of her ancestors, and Aiyana taught her the skills she would need to survive in the wilderness. Their actions at the fort had sent ripples throughout the territory. Others, inspired by their courage, began to resist the oppression of the authorities. A new era was dawning, an era of hope and resistance, sparked by a mother's love and the unwavering loyalty of a band of outcasts. The warpath had ended, but a new beginning was just over the horizon.